To give an example of tone, I thought I would update an old post with you, focusing specifically on shifting the tone. I've put this in a separate lesson because updating a whole blog post takes a while, and it's also completely unscripted, so I'm a little bit on the rambly side. So feel free to skip this lesson, continue with the rest of the course, and when you need help with tone, this lesson will be here waiting for you. So this post is about zoos and why I've personally chosen to A, boycott them, but B, not promote any of them through the Travel Rebellion. This is a tricky piece because while it's a polarising topic, I want to write it in a neutral tone. It's important to the brand that I do write it, but I know a lot of my target audience won't agree with it. A lot of animal lovers love zoos, a lot of animal lovers grow up and become zoologists because they love animals, and I don't want to ostracize or upset any of those people. This is a really old piece that I wrote back when I was just blogging for fun. This is long before I got into studying content writing or before I even knew what tone was. So please do not use this earlier version as an example of anything. But today we're going to update it and we're going to turn it into a neutral piece. So we're going completely monotone. Neutral to the point of boredom, because the facts and figures are shocking enough. I don't need to do anything to zhuzh them up. I've also found that when you're trying to avoid controversy, if you give people your opinion or your personal story, you're just giving them something to pick apart. Whereas if you just give them facts and figures, there's not that much rebuttal. Of course, this tone won't be the best example for all of your writing. It's not the best example for all of my writing. Each piece is different and each piece needs a different tone. However, if you are looking to make a piece more neutral, I think this example will help you. And also, if you're looking to make a piece more polarizing, this could also help you. You just need to do the complete opposite of everything I'm about to do.
So the first thing is that storytelling is a really good way to get the reader on your side, to get them to understand a little bit about you in most situations. This particular post isn't one. If you're trying to be neutral, it's best to stay away from personal stories or anything like that, because if you're saying something that people don't want to hear, they don't care about you. They don't care about you or your life story or who you are. All they know is that you're a person who's offending them. So probably best to leave all that stuff to a side. So I've literally opened this post with, I loved going to the zoo. It was my favorite thing as a kid. And a little story about how much I loved it, about how the guilt was kicking in. And I tried to excuse it. What's the best way to do this? Maybe I should just read this out loud. Okay. I loved going to the zoo. It was my favorite thing as a kid. And I still ran around getting really excited as an adult. It's where my boyfriend and I went on our first date. It's where we spent the 3 following anniversaries. It was always on my travel to-do list. And I was so excited to take our future children. Already, nobody cares. Nobody cares about you or your boyfriend, or it's so irrelevant. Like, you're not talking about them. You're not talking about anything to do with them. I've already lost their attention, even if this was in line with their beliefs. Even if you are against zoos, I've already bored you. So all of that can go. That's terrible. I'm skipping ahead of course a little bit, but a really good thing to start an article with is the very first line. That's where you got to hook them. Literally, it has to be a hook. It has to be the best line in the whole post, because if you're bored at the very start, there's no way you're going to make it to the end. One little trick that I like to do is I like to give a bit of data, but don't give the full story, and sort of make them read to get the full story. Not clickbait, not literally read and I'll tell you how, but a little smidgen. But I have to admit, it was getting harder to ignore the growing guilt. I've thrown myself into all animal activism campaigns, protesting fur fashion, SeaWorld, animal circuses, animal testing, the whole shebang. Yet I've always been full of excuses for zoos. Yes, zoos are bad, but some are better than others. Yes, zoos are bad, but safari parks give animals more spaces. Oh, sorry, if you're not familiar with code, the LU and the ILI is bullet points, and the I and NDI is italics. So yes, zoos are bad, but some animals settle in better than others. Yes, zoos are bad, but how else can children see their favourite animals up close? Yes, zoos are bad, but how else could I see animals up close? It's good to have these as a reason for why people want zoos, but again, I've made it all about me and nothing to do with them. So let's turn that into reasons people want zoos. Okay, so next part. The thing is, I've never worn 4. I only went to SeaWorld twice as a child. I've never been to an animal circus. I'm happy to check products for testing, but zoos are different. It's my favourite ever place. I love it, but. So using the safari parks give them more space excuse, I went to Woburn Safari Park with my friends. It started off a bit depressing with a lonely looking rhino, but I soon got over it when I saw the elephants and they had a calf. This is really annoying. These are emojis that have auto-changed to question marks. I'm animal obsessed anyway, but especially elephants. Again, Lottie, no one cares. In Africa and Asia, I could happily sit and watch them for hours. We were watching them throw dirt, play and chase the baby. I was so happy. The lonely rhino was long forgotten. I was on a baby elephant high. This is a good thing when you're editing your work and you're reading it out loud. If you feel like it's a diary entry, if it sounds like this, I thought this, I did this happened to me, I was so happy, just know that the end reader isn't going to care. We need to switch all of that around, whether you're trying to be polarizing or not. Storytelling's great, but you need to keep the story a tiny bit on you and mostly about them, or mostly about some other person. When you write with too many eyes, you just come across as so self-absorbed, and it's easy to pick holes in the argument because it looks like someone who's just skipping through the world and they don't see everybody else's point of view. So all of that can go. That sucks. Yeah, that sucks. So this is like the important part of the story. This is the bit where, for me, as someone who loves zoos, this is like the click moment that I hated them. We were literally just about to drive away when 2 rangers go into the field. I couldn't stop staring at them. What the fuck? Okay, don't swear in an article. You're going to offend half your audience. Not worth it. Unless it's like, you have a very sweary audience. Otherwise, yeah. What were they doing? Getting in with the elephants, the crazy bastards. Oh, if you're going to swear, don't do it twice in one sentence. Get out. Oh my God, I've sworn again. Jesus. Wait, what the was in their hands? They were both carrying bullhooks. I might be in denial. Oh my God, stop swearing. I might be in denial about zoos, but I'm in denial about bullhooks and what they are used for. And then in brackets, if I sound like a complete nutter at this point and you haven't got a clue why I'm so upset, please take a look at how elephants are trained with bullhooks. Okay, so this is another thing. Later on in the course, we're going to talk about SEO and cross-posting to your own. In a more updated version, I would move, this is the link here, by the way, I would move this to just the word bullhooks. So if people are curious, because you don't need to say, if you don't know what bullhooks are, click on the link and it'll be explained. We all know how the internet works, that's fine. This was happening in England, the same safari parks I'd been defending. They were no better than the elephant trekking camps and circuses I protest against. But instead of protesting it, I just fucking paid to watch it. Stop swearing. This is where we get to the actual good content. I can't explain how angry I was at them, at myself. Why didn't I research this? I always do a quick attraction name, animal abuse Google before going anywhere abroad. So why didn't I do it in England? So this is actual valuable content for responsible travel readers, or if they're just going to a zoo, just Google like Thai Cross Zoo animal abuse before going. Quality content. Not the way it's framed in the story though. Surely enough, it was all over Google waiting for me. This is where we get some data. Oh, that's just an image. But there was more on other safari parks too. West Midlands Safari Park sold its white lion cubs into a circus. Knowsley Safari Park called baboons, endangered deer, black buck and more before dumping them by the bins. Longleat Safari and Adventure Park put down 6 lions. Twycross Elephants beat its zoos. So yeah, this is all stuff that we can use. Discovering all of this completely tipped me over the edge. I've never been so naive. I really thought that zoos cared about animals. But all entertainment businesses are exactly the same. Profits come before animal welfare. So these are some arguments against zoos. Profits come before animal welfare. The only difference that English zoos and safaris spend more on smoke and mirrors, big fancy enclosures, and even Prozac to ease the visible signs of depression. So again, if you're going to make a claim like that, you need to back it up. Where's the evidence? That's an immediate thing for someone to come to in the comments, like, she's just making stuff up. I expected at least a few TripAdvisor reviews to share some of my concerns, but there isn't one. Only beaming reviews, especially for how great the elephant experience is. Maybe the most depressing part of this whole wake-up call. I swore to never go again. I spoke out about Woburn and I left it there. So again, so that's just about me leaving a TripAdvisor review. That's important because it's sort of that whole, like, if you've got a reader who's gone and they've seen something bad, talk about it, write a review, put it out there. So that's like a step. leave a review. I left all my defences behind too. I finally admitted that zoos don't have a single benefit. The animals are miserable, lonely, and in some cases suffering zoochosis, pacing, rocking back and forth, etc. Studies, well, hey, a link, have proved zoos don't educate or empower children. Worst of all, they are perceived to help wild populations when they actually do nothing but capture. There is a commonly misheld conception that zoos are not only saving wild animals from extinction, but also reintroducing them into their wild habitats. The confusion stems from many sources, all of them zoo-based. In reality, most zoos have no contact of any kind with any reintroduction program. The next time I see a zoo animal, it will be in the wild, a sanctuary, or a documentary, but never in a zoo. And then just a load of sign-up stuff at the end. So, wow, that was bad. First, I'm just going to pluck out anything that I think is genuinely valuable content here. So far, we've got, we'll say, animal abuse, most people don't like, reasons people want zoos. Get rid of that, that's rubbish. We'll get rid of the images because that's just annoying for the sake of editing. A horrible, sweary thing that has nothing to do with anything. Well, I'll leave it in for now, but I'll retype it. SEO link to a previous thing. Let's move all of this to the start. Okay, I'm sure a lot of that would have been very boring for you to watch, so I've sped it up and now you're back with me and I'm just going to explain what I've been doing. So the first thing I did was I pulled out all the parts of the blog posts that had genuine value for the end user and were actually useful and beneficial. Then I put together a quick little structure. So I've got the introduction with a shocking fact or a hook. Then I've got the introduction body, and there I've got the animal abuse that most people don't like, which we pulled from the original post, and the personal story that we pulled out as well. However, we're going to rewrite it so it is a lot less about me and a lot more about the actual facts of what's happening. Then in the main body, arguments for and against zoos, and I've broken them down into abuse, education, privilege, conservation, funding conservation. And if you're wondering where all this information has come from, like I said, I wrote this original post years and years ago, and since then I have gathered a lot more research, so I've just been copying in notes from random places just to bulk it out and bring it up to date. And then the Port Lymph story, which is basically, I'm trying not to make this about me, but it's nice to have some story to it, some opinions. And the best way for me to do this without people getting offended at me is to put in quotes from Daniel, what's his name? The owner of Port Lymph, Damien Aspinall. Anyway, he inherited the zoo from his father. He is against zoos. He doesn't think that we should keep animals prisoners. And it's really interesting hearing things from his point of view. And again, this is something that in the comments, if people want to rip him apart, they can do that. That's fine, because it's not me and it's not our brand. I don't need to come to his defense, if that makes sense. And then if anyone's offended, they will be offended at that guy, not at us, if that makes sense. Then conclusion body. So the end of the main body text. Sorry, these aren't the best titles. You'll learn more about how to actually structure a blog post later on in the course, so don't worry about this so much now. Conclusion of the body, how to visit ethically, and then the conclusion, take action and research like now, like do something now. So it turns out I can't edit and vocalize what I'm doing at the same time. So the next 4 hours of footage look a lot like this. Nobody wants to sit through that, so I thought I would save you the time and skip straight to the end product. And if you want to look at this document properly, it's available in the download section for this lesson. So at the top, we've got the original zoo post. We've already read through this, so I'm going to skip down. Then we've got the notes. I've got the issues with the original post. Reads like a diary entry, focuses on me, not the reader. Too much swearing and emotion, not enough reason. Polarising statements without convincing evidence. Worst of all, they were perceived to help wild populations when they actually do nothing but capture. This isn't even really true. They do something for wild populations, it's just not as much as people think. And stated my point of view and just expected readers to agree. How to make it a better polarising post. Start with a really shocking hook, target it to anti-zoo people, write about them and their experiences, be compassionate, state your own strong opinion and back it up with reasoning/evidence,
Call to action, rally to make a real difference. For example, get everyone to sign a government petition to get a terrible zoo shut down and all the animals rescued. And then this is what we did. How to make a better neutral post. Start with a really shocking hook, reduce your own opinions and experiences significantly, stick to the facts and figures, present both sides of the argument, call to action, encourage them to do some research and make up their own mind. The final layout we went with was the introduction, shocking fact/hook, brief personal story, then in the main body, arguments for and against zoos, the Port Lymph story, and the conclusion is a call to action, do your own research, and mention that sanctuaries are also an option. So here's the rewrite. We're all disgusted by animal abuse in the travel industry. Elephants beaten so we can ride them, link to a previous post. Lions shot by hunters shortly after we cuddle them, link. And SeaWorld's orcas stolen from the wild for a short lifetime of misery and confinement. Is it time for responsible travellers to also be disgusted by zoos? After all, even Asian elephants working in timber camps live longer than those born in zoos. Reference and then a link to the study. Image of Woburn Zoo using bullhooks. Seeing Woburn Safari Park use bullhooks to control their elephants was enough for me to boycott zoos. However, I know many people swear by the conservation, educational and scientific benefits, so I decided to learn more about it. Want to know all the data without reading the boring studies? Read on, my friend. Do the animals suffer? Image of Gus the polar bear. And then in quotes, some zoos are better than others. In the UK, Woburn Safari Park uses electric shocks to make elephants perform. Blackpool Zoo uses bullhooks, and Twycross Zoo has been found guilty of beating them. Even if you put these to one side as particularly bad zoos, a government study of elephants in the UK found more than 80% have foot problems, more than 80% have walking difficulties, and 23% have an obvious limp or are severely lame, on a par to factory farm dairy cows or broiler chickens. Good or bad, no zoo can replicate the habitat size or the stimulation of the wild. As a result, all captive animals suffer some degree of physical or mental issues. One famous example was Gus, Central Park Zoo's polar bear. After decades in a 5,000 square foot enclosure, less than 0.00009% of his natural range, he would swim in 8-figure patterns for up to 12 hours a day. His neurotic behaviour was driven by boredom and solitary confinement. Despite the zoo's enrichment and Prozac, an antidepressant drug, his repetitive swimming couldn't be curbed until he died in 2013. Reference. Are zoos good for education? Image of an educational display at a certain zoo. We need zoos to learn about wildlife. Many zoos have educational programs for visitors, and there are plenty of studies proving how effective these educational programs are. The only problem is that all of these studies are biased. I've asked zoologists to send me non-biased studies verifying the effectiveness of zoo education programs, and this is what I was sent. Hancock's 2001, written by, I'm not going to be able to pronounce that, written by Werribee Open Range Zoo Director. The next one was written by the International Union of Directors of Zoological Gardens. Whitehead 1995, written by the Head of Education at Twycross Zoo. Serrell 1981, written by the Chairman of the Public Education Committee of the American Association of Zoological Parks and Aquariums. Gradual 2017, written by Woodland Park Zoo CEO. Courage 2016, funded by San Diego Zoo. Corleone? Oh, this is why content writing's so good, you never have to actually read it out. Colony 2017, written by Jardin des Plantes Zoo Director. Gray 2017, written by Chief Executive Officer to Zoos Victoria. Maynard 2017, written by Cincinnati Zoo Director. Sinbins 2017, funded by Zoos Victoria and the Melbourne Zoo. Non-biased studies can't find any evidence that zoo education programs are effective. Some even urge zoos to stop making the claim as it's unwarranted and potentially misleading to consumers, and then reference to 2 different studies. Are zoos good for conservation? Image of a baby born at a zoo. Zoos are a modern Noah's Ark. They provide a bank of DNA to ensure the survival of the species. There are quite a few issues with the Noah's Ark argument. Firstly, the Ark is still being stocked with wild-caught animals. 6% of new zoo animals and 29% of birds are wild-caught. Reference. For example, 70% of the elephants in European zoos are wild-caught. Reference. In 2016, 18 wild elephants were caught from Swaziland for American zoos. Reference. And 30 wild elephants were caught from Zimbabwe for Chinese zoos. Reference. Secondly, the Ark is stocked with cute animals, not endangered species. Only 15% of the captive population are threatened. Only some of those are part of breeding programs, and of those, a tiny fraction have been released back into the wild. The individuals that make it back into the wild have terrible survival rates for a number of reasons. Zoos can't replicate geographical knowledge of the best places to find food, water, or shelter, and captive bred animals have a reduced resistance to diseases found in the wild after being sheltered from them for generations. Because there are relatively few individuals in the breeding programs, there's a limited gene pool, causing inbreeding and hereditary problems. It goes deeper than just inbreeding though. In the wild, individuals with the best survival skills win and pass on their genes. In captivity, it's the individuals who are just a captivity best who win and pass on their genes. This shift in the winning criteria impacts the offspring's survival instincts. For example, captive populations of red junglefowl brackets, wild ancestors of chickens brackets, differ significantly in response to predators after just a handful of generations in captivity. A final flaw in the Noah's Ark argument is that it's not cost effective. Producing captive bred animals in zoos is extremely expensive, but producing wild habitat isn't. Maintaining a captive black rhino costs 16 times more than protecting enough wild habitat to support a wild one. The animals being bred in zoos today are terrible candidates for release, and the only reason they're being bred is to restock zoos. That said, there is a potential future for zoos to serve as an effective Noah's Ark and significantly aid conservation efforts. Conde et al. Suggested specialising zoos for conservation breeding. Instead of today's zoos displaying a few individuals from many species, specialised zoos would house a lot of individuals from a few threatened species, ideally near the wild release area. These specialised zoos would increase the gene pool, expose individuals to the local diseases and habitat, and potentially become rescue centres for their wild counterparts too. As of yet, no zoos have acted on this suggestion, but that could change as more members of the public become anti-zoo. Reference. Do zoos fund conservation projects? Image of field conservation projects funded by a certain zoo. People aren't interested in conservation. We need zoos to make them interested. Some zoos contribute significant funds to conservation programs and exchange information between zoo researchers and field scientists. In 2000, UK federated zoos contributed a total of 15 million to wildlife conservation programs. Reference. Many zoos don't fund conservation. In 2000, the average American Zoo Association zoos and aquaria spent 0.1% of their operating budget supporting conservation and research projects. Personally, I like to believe that people are good, and we can care about conservation and donate towards it without needing to see captive animals caged in front of us. For comparison, 64 million was donated to WWF in 2000, of which 46 million was spent on conservation programs. The zoo owner who wants zoos phased out. Image of Damien Aspinall with a lowland gorilla. Damien Aspinall manages Howlett's Wildlife Park and Port Lymph in the UK. He believes it's wrong to keep sentient creatures as lifelong prisoners without parole. Aspinall argues that 80% of zoo animals are not in any sense endangered. They're either hybrid creatures with no conservation value or on the contraceptive pill to stop them breeding, thereby pushing up costs. If you're a true conservationist and you truly believe in nature, the ultimate goal is you don't need zoos. They always throw education back at you, but that's total and utter nonsense. In the next 20 to 30 years, it would be a lovely goal to see zoos phased out, or if they're not, to see them truly doing what I believe is true conservation work. What I mean by that is they only keep truly endangered animals. We're supposed to be the intelligent species. Surely we're above having animals to entertain our children. What we're doing is culturalizing to our children to say it's okay that man is the dominant species. It's just wrong. We need to deculturalize the public and phase zoos out. Aspinall argues the millions of pounds spent on new enclosures would be better used breeding endangered species for a return to the wild. We've played God once when we took animals out of the forest for zoos, so surely we can play God again to try and get some of those animals home. The Aspinall Foundation released 51 Western lowland gorillas in Africa. However, it hasn't been as successful as they hoped. The captive-born gorillas were unable to care for themselves in the wild or survive attacks from wild gorillas. Several have been found dead or are still missing. The survivors are now kept confined on an island sanctuary. Critics commented that the outcome was predictable. The Dian Fossey Gorilla Fund added, Returning a handful of zoo animals can't begin to counter the vast numbers that are lost every year, so Damien's money would have been better spent saving gorillas already in the wild. Luckily, Aspinall has had much better results working with wild gorillas. Their gorilla orphanage in Congo-Brazzaville has rescued over 100 gorillas orphaned by the bushmeat trade and poaching. Reference. Is it okay to visit zoos? Image of an animal in a zoo. That's up to you and your personal morals. If you still want to visit or you're curious how ethical your local zoo is, here are 3 simple steps to vet animal attractions. To demonstrate the process, I've used 3 UK zoos as an example. Southlake Safari Zoo, dubbed as Britain's worst zoo, Edinburgh Zoo, an average zoo with a strong reputation, and Chester Zoo, considered by many as one of the best zoos in the UK. Number 1. Search their site for facts and figures about contributions to conservation. Southlake Safari Zoo site had nothing. Edinburgh Zoo's site had this vague blurb mentioning conservation, but no details or data. Chester Zoo site shows all the conservation projects they support around the world and their scientific contribution. That said, they don't go in too deep into the project's details or provide any figures for the money spent towards them. Number 2, check if they have a history of abuse. Simply Google zoo name animal abuse. Southlake Safari Park brought up a lot of information. This was all found in Google's first place of results. Now, as you can see, there's a lot of bullet points. On the post, I'm going to have this as like click to expand, so you won't see them all at once. But for the sake of reading this out now, I'll just read the first 3. Southlake Safari Zoo was raided by the RSPCA inspectors under investigation after a tiger mauled a keeper. A government report found that almost 500 animals died in 4 years, mainly from emaciation, exposure and poor care. The paper also highlighted how Mr. Gill has listed his 3rd wife, Miss Peru finalist Frida Riviera Schreiber, as the zoo's vet, despite her not being UK qualified to treat animals. And then it just goes on with how many different ways that different animals have died. It's pretty horrific. Next example, Edinburgh Zoo abuse. And then the first page results were a keeper at Edinburgh Zoo escaped being attacked by a panda after fleeing pen. Zoo night events in which partygoers can create a loud, stressful environment for the animals on display. And then I'll just read the 3rd one. Endangered Arabian antelopes were bred and then destroyed by Edinburgh Zoo. Chester Zoo abuse. The first page results are Chester Zoo, animal rights campaigners, fury after 5 elephants died in 6 years. Chester Zoo turns a blind eye to cruel animal performances despite purported opposition to animal shows. And the 3rd one, sent a young male to a zoo which stages daily elephant shows using bullhooks. And then a little box. Quick ethical travel tip. This is a great way to vet every single animal attraction you consider. If you want to test it for yourself, see the difference between these 2 animal attractions in Thailand. Berman Emily's Elephant Sanctuary abuse comes up empty-handed with no relevant pages. Tiger Kingdom abuse comes up with thousands of relevant pages detailing the abuse. End box. Check terrible TripAdvisor reviews that mention cruel. Southlake Safari Zoo has 6 terrible TripAdvisor reviews that mention the word cruel. One reads, shocking and cruel. They say that they have an interest in animals. You can tell the animal's temperament. They are so unhappy. Hardly moving, pacing back and forwards, tiny enclosures for massive animals. I was shocked and appalled at the size of the park. The bears couldn't fit in their beds. The lions must have been miserable. 2 females and 1 male lion locked in no bigger than a 6 by 6 foot box. Disgusting. You wouldn't do that to humans unless you were punishing them. You don't care about the welfare of the animals, you care about making money. What an awful place to go. Don't go, it will make you cry, not laugh. Edinburgh Zoo has 14 terrible TripAdvisor reviews that mention the word cruel. One reads, cruel, disgusting, disappointing, heartbreaking. After visiting the zoo on Friday, I was hugely disappointed in almost everything. The animals were kept in small cages, showing signs of mental distress. The tiger and some bears were pacing up and down for hours as they were enclosed in such a small space. The cages were poorly looked after, they were dirty, and various different animals hardly had a drink of water, never mind food. The hippos were in a tiny pool, hardly big enough for 2 humans, never mind 2 hippos. There was no penguin parade on, and the koala enclosure was closed. The smaller animals seemed to have bigger cages than the large animals. I can safely say I will not be returning to the zoo again in the future. A very cruel place for the animals to be living, a very sad, dull environment to visit. feeling guilty about paying money to see these poor animals suffer. And then Chester Zoo has 2 terrible TripAdvisor reviews that mention cruel. One reads, "Not worth the journey. After a 2.5-hour journey, Chester Zoo was such a big letdown. I don't normally post such a negative review, but I felt compelled to inform people of how disappointing this zoo is. We have a local wildlife park/zoo on our doorstep, and even though it is half the size of Chester, we feel that the park and animals are in a better condition than what we discovered today. After spending our visit walking the full length of the park, we only saw around 5 animals in enclosures. Not sure where or why no other animals were spotted, but for a £50 entry fee, brackets 2 adults, this was not worth the while. As massive animal fans and cruelty-free campaigners, we felt the actual enclosure that they use in Chester was far too small and not regularly tended to as they should be. We came back from Bali and we feel that the animals in that underdeveloped country have a better quality of care than what we saw today. Finally, I will add that we didn't witness any animal cruelty, brackets thank God, but for first, brackets and last time visitors, we feel very let down." Number 4, if you witness abuse, report it. This is a really important step. If you've had a bad experience at a zoo, bracket, or any animal attraction, close bracket, and left feeling guilty, tell the internet about it. Leave a review on TripAdvisor, Google, or Facebook. By joining the conversation, you're helping other people research and make more ethical decisions. Visit animal sanctuaries guilt-free. Image of a happy person at an animal sanctuary. A key issue with zoos is breeding animals with no future prospects. Luckily, there are thousands of animal sanctuaries around the world waiting for you to visit. True animal sanctuaries don't breed the animals. They know captive life isn't ideal and a wild one isn't an option. So they give the best life they can without creating another generation of wildlife dependent on humans. This also keeps their enclosures free for future rescues. A couple of great animal sanctuary options in the UK are Cornish Seal Sanctuary, link, Monkey Sanctuary, link, and Screech Owl Sanctuary, link in Cornwall. The Isle of Wight Donkey Sanctuary, link, and Friend Farmed Animal Rescue in Kent, link. When choosing an animal sanctuary to visit, check they don't have breeding programs. If they do, it's just a regular zoo or farm. We made it! So hopefully, after hearing me read all of that out, or if you just downloaded the document and read it for yourself, you can tell the difference in the tone. The first one wasn't neutral or polarising, it just came across as a little bit bratty and a little bit diary entry and a little bit I'm right and you're wrong. And hopefully the second one did not have a polarising tone at all. It was very neutral. You didn't hear any of the writers' personal opinions. They just stated the facts and shortly mentioned a personal story about why they stopped visiting zoos. And that's it.